friends. Before we start, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Bernali and I currently work as a business analyst in IndusNet Technologies Private Limited. Today I am going to talk about the concept of user stories, an integral part of the agile way of software development. When I first heard this term, in order to map it to my brain, I defined it as users say it, so that when I write user stories, I can write it as a first person's narrative. In short, I considered myself as the user. Well, that helped me to pivot myself into the concept. Now let us touch a little base with the Agile methodology. The Agile methodology, it is a practice that promotes continuous iteration of development and testing throughout the software development life cycle of the project. It breaks down projects into bits of user functionality and continuously delivering them into short cycle. Each such cycle that is called a sprint. Now user stories in Agile provide a launching point for the team to develop solutions that do not adhere to any kind of tools and processes. These are the heart of the Agile methodology. Everything revolves around the user stories, and hence, coming up with good, balanced user stories, it is a battle half won. Where do user stories stand in Agile? Now, as soon as we get a client requirement, we do not right away start using user stories, right? First comes the project idea, where we extract the requirements, analyze them, and listen to the idea or the product concept from the end client. Next, we have the project charter, where we define the project objectives, the stakeholders of the project, and the main business understanding. Once that is done, we decide on the tentative development timeline, all the features that are in scope and out of scope, and the end deliverables. Once all the above are sorted and checked and confirmed, the formal business proposal is prepared. As the business proposal is finalized, we come to the user stories section. I think that now does this mean that the user stories replace the requirement document? I think the better way to think about this is that user stories are simply better documents. However, it's important to note that the stories and the documents are nothing if they aren't discussed. Is a user story. Let's come to it now. Now, a user story, it is an informal natural language description of one or more features of the software system. It helps shift the focus from writing about requirements to talking about them. It articulates how a piece of work will deliver a particular value to a customer. It can be considered as the smallest unit of work. It achieves end goal from the end user's perspective. It provides a non-technical language to provide context for the development team and their efforts. Let us come, how do we write user stories? As I have earlier mentioned, a user story is as users see it. As a process of writing so-called user stories is very crucial even if a development team works with already given specs and requirements. As I have earlier said, it's as users see it. A user story speaks from the end user's perspective and follows this format. As a someone, I want to do something so that some result or benefit. Let us clarify with some examples. For an online garment website, product zoom feature say, where as a customer, I want to be able to zoom images to get a better view of the fabric. Here I have the user, which is the customer. Here I have the do something, which is zoom images. And here I have the benefit, that is the better view of the fabric. In the products search feature, as a customer, I want to be able to search desired products so that I can easily find what I am looking for. Further, for FAQ, as a site visitor, I can read frequently asked questions so that I can get quick answers. For a learning website, and that is so true for me. As a user perspective, I can say, as a site visitor, I want to be able to read some articles so that I can learn without first joining the site. So once I have given the examples of user story, let me identify the main parameters of the user story. So which are the main points of the user story? Let's see. As a someone, it defines our end user. I want to It specifies what our end user wants to do, and so that it describes the benefit that our end user will get. When we have defined all the three, we make sure of a checkpoint, a condition of satisfaction. Thus, we define an acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is nothing but a test case or test cases. Acceptance criteria, it is the condition of satisfaction, a way to determine whether a user story is done or not done. Example of a user story with acceptance criteria. Let us define a user story along with its acceptance criteria. For example, an e-commerce website. We need to register online in order to proceed with the payment process. Right? So my story is, as a user, I want to be able to register online so that I can proceed with the payment process. What are the applicable acceptance criteria that can be defined here? There has to be some mandatory fields of information in a form. Hence, form submission can be done only after filling all the details. All input fields should be checked for the input format. Say for example, email format. Users to receive a notification email after registration is successful, so that the user knows his registration was submitted successfully. Let us see how the hierarchy goes, how we finally come to the user story. Now there's a vision from the end client. This describes the business goal. For example, let us consider an e-commerce platform as the vision. Now the different capabilities of the e-commerce platform, that can be different themes. So the theme, that is the capabilities of e-commerce platform, is product management, customer registration, online purchase of course, and order tracking. So once we have the themes in place, we can divide them into different epics. The epics enable a user to achieve a clearly identified business objective. And what is that? Say online purchase. What can we do for that? That is add to cart, make payment. Once we do that, online purchase is achieved, right? And then for user story, the epic, that is add to cart. What can be the user story for that? Edit, remove cart articles, right? Once we add products to cart, we can edit the products, remove them from the cart products. We can also change the quantities of the product, and finally we can also apply vouchers. Now whether the cart function is correct or not, how can we test that? What is the acceptance criteria? The criteria needed to validate the user story. What is that? Cost calculation is accurate. Information is stored in the database. Of course, that is after the purchase. And changes made to the cart products are reflected in the cost calculation, like changing the quantities. Once you change the quantities, the costs also change, right? Now that we understand how we arrive at user stories sequentially, let us see how we map a user story. You can see the epic, story, and sprint here. Now, epics are arranged sequentially. These are the different business objectives that need to be developed. Below them are the user stories, which are arranged into sprints as per their priorities. Each sprint comprises of a set of user stories, which on completion releases a minimum viable version of the product. Now that we have understood the hierarchy and the user story mapping, let us understand what are the benefits that we get. It allows us to see the big picture in our product backlog. It gives us a better tool for making decisions about grooming and prioritizing our backlog. It promotes silent brainstorming and a collaborative approach to generating our user stories. It encourages an iterative development approach where only early deliveries validate our architecture and solution. It is a great visual alternative to traditional project plans. It is a useful model for discussing and managing scope. It allows us to visual dimensional planning and real options for our project or product. Life cycle of a user story. At the beginning of a project, user stories are identified and developed in a story writing workshop, a brainstorming session in which the agile team comes up with as many user stories as possible. Each story is sized and prioritized for the first time. This prioritized list creates the product backlog or the release backlog. During the workshop, the team selects an iteration length, usually between 1 and 4 weeks, and also the rate at which they will be able to complete user stories, called the velocity, both of which become very important when determining how to schedule user stories later in the process. During the iteration planning process, the user stories contained in the product release backlog are segmented into iteration or sprint. The user stories for the first sprint make the sprint backlog. Once the first iteration is ready to take off, conversations begin for each user story between members of the Agile team. The user story gets updated with details of the conversation captured in the form of acceptance test. As a user story can be updated at any point as needed up until the iteration coding has been completed. If a user story cannot be completed through the iteration for some unforeseen reason, it is returned back to the product backlog and rescheduled for another reason. That is very important, a point for making user stories independent. Sometimes we can't get rid of order dependencies on user story, but that should be an exception. Finally, let us come to the characteristics of a good user story. The Invest mnemonic for Agile software development projects was created by Bill Wick as a reminder of the characteristics of a good quality product backlog item. Invest stands for a set of criteria used to assess the quality of a user story. Let us see what the criteria are. Independent. Independent stories can be freely reordered in the product backlog, just as we discussed. Sometimes we can't get rid of an order dependency, but it should be an exception. Negotiable, open for discussion. A user story is a reminder to have a conversation. In that conversation, the team negotiates the concrete solution, the I want part. The story may be enhanced or rewritten. Valuable. Now each story adds something useful for the end user so that part. This leads to a vertical increment. Example, a working slice of a front end, scripts and database instead of a finished database without a front end. Estimable. You need a rough effort estimate to guesstimate the return on investment and order the backlog. If you can't estimate, you need to number 1, break the story into pieces. Number 2, better understand what value it's meant to add. And number C, explore unknown technology in time box research spike. Small. Small stories are easier to estimate and test and hide fewer misunderstandings. Small can be 1 day in a web shop or 3 persons week for a medical product. At the very least, the team must be able to finish a story in one iteration. Testable. It must be able to write a test for each story. Otherwise, how will you confirm that the story is done? This, my friends, is the acceptance criteria. Sometimes test cases are given as acceptance criteria. If you can't think of a test, that story is probably too fuzzy. Friends, I hope I have been able to present a conceptual understanding of user stories, and I'm really hopeful that it helps in your journey further in user stories. Thank you.